Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Primetime Alive program, Answers to the Questions You Have Always Wanted to Ask. I'm Vicki Newell, as Tim said, and I manage the Primetime Alive program here for Mary Greeley. A reminder, we wear our masks everywhere except in here when we have this huge room and there's just a few of us in here and we can keep social distance. Also, a reminder that to ask a question, this red arrow up in the right-hand corner, if it's not open, you just click on it, it opens up, and then you should see something similar, and you should be able to enter a question at the bottom and hit send to submit that. And we will get to those questions at the end of the presentation. All right, and you know what, those questions that you should ask before you start a program is how to pronounce your last name. And I just asked my two presenters that just as we were starting, and guess what? I know I'm going to butcher them, but they can reintroduce themselves when they come back up. So we have two presenters today. We have Savannah Proyle. She is a pre-arrangement specialist with Adams Funeral Home. She has a degree in mortuary science and has been with Adams Funeral Home since 2017. We also have Carol Jermeyer, and she is the regional manager for Adams Funeral Home and has worked in pre-need for more than 20 years. And I believe Savannah is going to start us out, so I'll welcome Savannah.
I hope that I'm in the window. Hi, everyone. My name is Savannah, and I'm the pre-arrangement specialist at Adams Funeral Home. We're super excited to be here today. I wanted to invite my regional manager, Carol, because she's got a really great story, which she's going to tell us here in a moment. But a little background on me. I started the I went to school at DMAC in Ankeny for mortuary science and was doing my internship there at the funeral home. And I quickly realized the need for somebody on the pre-arranging department. And so once that position became available, I quickly jumped on it, and I've been there ever since, and I absolutely love it. So like I said, I have invited Carol, my regional manager, today to share a story that hits close to home. And after that, we'll go in and answer a few questions that we've got today. And Carol, go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Carol Jermeyer, and I am a manager with Savannah at Adams Funeral Home. And I have been in pre-arranging for 22 years in the funeral industry. My background, I started out in Minnesota, and I'm licensed in Minnesota and Iowa, and I help out in actually 4 states with funeral homes. And Savannah asked me to come and share a little bit of my story because with everything, and you know, you guys, we've heard this over and over and over, but with everything changing in the last year for us, something that happened on a personal note for me is in the last year, I lost both of my parents. I lost my father right before COVID, and I lost my mother during COVID. And the reason that Savannah asked me to share my story is because even though I've been in the industry 22 years, it really, really resonated with me and all of my friends how important it is to pre-arrange your funeral. Of course, being in the industry as long as I have, both of my parents were prearranged for the last 15 years. I wouldn't let them off the hook with that. It's so important. But the differences that came about just having one, my dad passed away right before COVID. We were able to have his beautiful, wonderful service. We were able to select his casket. We had a full traditional funeral. My dad and mom are very well known in their church community. There was over 300 people. It was just a beautiful testament to who and what he was. Sadly, he was the caregiver for my mom, who developed Alzheimer's in 2013. So of course, even being in the industry, we were a family that was impacted on, we never saw this coming as far as, you know, you always expect the caregiver to outlive the person with the illness. Well, in 20 some years I've been doing this, we see it over and over and over, that the toll of caregiving that it takes on the people, that sometimes they go first. And sadly, in our situation, that was the case. But we were able to do a beautiful service for my dad. He did have a massive stroke a couple months before his passing. So we were so thankful that we had taken the time and written down every detail of his funeral, down to hymns, scripture verses, flowers, food. And on a lighter note, my dad's favorite food was Belgian waffles. So for his funeral luncheon, we had a giant Belgian waffle bar. And everybody got to pick toppings and they had Belgian waffles. But it made our hearts feel so good that we knew these were his wishes. So not only did my parents prearrange, but they had it pre-funded. So we never had to worry about those issues because my dad was in charge of the estate. With my mom having Alzheimer's, she was completely mentally incapacitated by the time he passed. So sadly, she wasn't even at his funeral and frankly didn't even know he had passed away. But everything was in place, everything was organized. So then we all got hit with COVID. And the whole pandemic and everything changed for everybody. My mom, of course, was in a memory care. And so we lost our ability to see her, to hug her, to be with her in person. So as time went on, March, of course, we all know it all hit. And then in June, she was put on hospice in memory care. And my sister and I, unfortunately, as all of us experienced, we could not go see her. But again, so thankful that not only was my mom, taken away from us as far as COVID, but also mentally, and her mental and emotional capacity was gone too. But 15 years ago, because we had prearranged with them, I knew every scripture, I knew every hymn she wanted, I knew exactly what casket she wanted. The money was in place, thank heavens, because she was in a memory care where her cost of care was up to almost $14,000 a month. Well, that can only last so long. But thankfully, we had that part covered. So we didn't have to worry. We didn't have to budget. We could give my mom, even though she was not aware, we knew that we could give her exactly what she and my dad wanted for her in the end. My mom went through her Alzheimer's journey, and right before the very end, after she had lost her ability to swallow, she tested positive for COVID. So not only were we not able to see her, but we were not able to even say goodbye to her. And all of us, so many of us experienced what that is about. And it's devastating, it's heartbreaking, it's frustrating. But you know what? Again, the fact that we knew, because we had taken the time to just sit down, write down wishes, write down what they wanted, we had the money in place, we were able to do and had the comfort in the end of knowing that we were able to give mom the things that she always wanted. So my mom passed away. Her service was very not like my dad's. We were able to do a beautiful casket, but as we all learned about what a rolling visitation became, where you just kind of walk through and walk right by the casket, at that point in June, and being from Minnesota, Minnesota was very buttoned up. And so we were not able to have that important church service that she always wanted, but we were introduced to the longer graveside service, which we all learned about. the social distancing, the masking, everything that all of us came about and learned about through this past year. We still were able to give her a beautiful day. Was it what we always wanted? Not necessarily, but we were able to take her wishes that were written down in her handwriting and be able to plug them in as much as we could. And that did bring so much comfort to my brother and sister and I. And so the reason that Savannah and I wanted to chat with you today is we have really, in the funeral industry, we have really experienced a very, very heightened awareness of all of our mortality. Every one of us, no matter how young, how old, we have seen everybody of every age, nurses, doctors, older people. For the whole last year, we read about articles of COVID taking anybody of any age. And so we've been inundated with questions about, how do I prearrange? What do I need to do? What are some options that I do have? The one thing I have really taken away from last year and the pandemic is a heightened sense, not only of our mortality, but a very big sense of boldness. And that's the word I've kind of chosen for this year, is because of the fact that we have so many unknowns in our life. I mean, COVID created questions about everything. Where to go, who to talk to, how close to get, do you hug, do you elbow, what do you do? And nobody knew, and nobody really knew what strains or varieties, and we've got vaccines. We now have 3 vaccines, and when do you get it, how do you get it? So there is so many questions, so many unknowns. The one thing that I have always found great comfort in is that no matter what funeral home you pick, no matter what prearrangement person you work with, it is so important to get your wishes down no matter how old or how young you are. Because you know what, you guys, this is the only bit of control we get in a whole concept that is totally out of control. And so we wanted to go through today a list of commonly asked questions, and I believe all of you were emailed these questions. Yes. But we wanted to go through that because we've really found that a lot of people do have a lot of questions. There was a lot of fear initially of people getting together as far as getting their questions answered, and what do I do, where do I go, who do I talk to? But it is so important, folks, that you just do something. Now, as Vicki said, Savannah is here from Adams Funeral Home, but we want to make sure that everybody understands it doesn't matter what funeral home you're a part of. Just make sure you do something. Make sure you talk to somebody. A lot of people say to us, well, you know what? My kids know exactly what I want. I put it down in my will, or I wrote it out somewhere. The one thing I say to that is think about when you read the will. The will is not read for a week or two after the funeral. And you may have talked to your kids about this, but at the time of extreme grief, at the time of extreme emotion, you don't always remember everything. Again, being in the business 22 years, having my parents' wishes written down for 15 years, my brother and sister and I had to go over everything in detail again. Because of the heartbreak, you don't remember all those things. So thank heavens we had it written down. We're going to go through these questions. Savannah and I are going to take turns reading them and answering them. And then if anyone has any questions, I believe they're going to alert us to them. And folks, please know, no question is a dumb question, because I'll guarantee you, if you've got a question on this, there's at least 10 other people that have the same questions. So please feel free to ask them. So I'm going to start out with, what should I do first? Well, the first thing you really need to do is figure out which funeral home you want to use, okay? Figure out that funeral home and decide, okay, This is who I want to use. Make sure it's written down. If you're living in a senior campus, let them know, let your family know, write it down somewhere, and then get a book from the funeral home to write down your wishes. Savannah?
Once I've chosen a trusted funeral home, what's next? Essentially, you're going to want to make an appointment with whoever their Savannah is at that location. That's going to be the very first step.
What should I expect from my meeting with a licensed pre-need advisor? So what you would do when you found your Savannah or whoever, you would sit down with them and you should expect them to go over in detail any questions you might have, inform you of any questions on what type of services you might be interested in, provide you with a general price list from that funeral home. And usually every funeral home has sheets that you fill in information about yourself and about your family so they know who they should be working with when a death occurs.
How may I lift the bulk of the burden of my passing from my loved ones? When I meet with families, the very first thing that we do is we go through the Trifold. So essentially that's going to be full of information, vital information, date of birth, important things that we need to know, our funeral directors need to know, and a lot of times, more often than not, your children may not know. So being able to write all that stuff down, cemetery information, this step truly offers peace of mind.
So pre-planning is as easy as documenting my wishes and choices. Essentially, yes. I mean, one of the things that the funeral homes I work with, one of the things that we really pride ourselves in is trying to make this as simple as possible. We start out with the very basics. And we start out with, first of all, what are your questions? What type of services are you interested in? We answer those questions. And as Savannah just said, documenting down who you are, where you were born, who your parents were, the things that the state requires of us. We take all of that off your family. So when the time comes, we basically just hold their hand and walk them through it.
So tell me about prefunding. How can I keep my loved ones from bearing the financial cost? So the prefunding portion is essentially the second step in prearranging. It really alleviates that once a death occurs, there's no question to who's going to have to pay for it. That, and just all in all itself, being able to tell your loved one, being able to tell a family that there's no additional expenses or whatnot is huge.
Does pre-funding guarantee that the cost of the items I pay for will not increase for me over time? So yes, and I can only speak on behalf of Adams Funeral Home. Each funeral home gets to decide whether they guarantee costs or not. But keep in mind, folks, this is something very, very important. When a funeral home does guarantee their costs, which Adams Funeral Home does, they can only guarantee the costs that they are responsible for. The embalming, the bathing, dressing, and casketing, the costs for the visitation, the funeral. The costs for like opening the grave at a cemetery, the costs for a gravestone, the costs for food, death certificates, honorariums to the people at your church. Those costs we as a funeral home do not have any control over. So we will be more than happy to guarantee the prices that we offer, but we cannot guarantee all of them. And like Savannah just alluded to, pre-funding is very, very important because another thing that came about with COVID last year is there were some families that were very highly impacted financially by COVID. And so families maybe lost jobs or what have you. And to have them walk into a funeral home and find out that mom or dad never paid a dime towards their funeral and they were completely financially responsible, that is not only are you devastated by the passing, but wow, what a burden to be put on your lap. So pre-funding is very, very vital, and there's a lot of options available with that. But as far as guaranteeing too, again, like we said, it's up to the funeral home on if they guarantee or not.
So what happens to the money I pay from now until the time of my passing? So what we do is we set up irrevocable burial trusts, which I believe that's something that we talk more in depth about as we go down the questions. But essentially, the irrevocable burial trust is going to protect you and your loved one from the nursing home in the event that you would ever have to go into any nursing home and exceed all of your funds. And, but like I said, that's something that we'll get more into in depth down below.
If I choose to pre-fund, is there a payment plan option, or does it all have to be paid in one lump sum? If you go with Savannah at Adams, Savannah will explain to you that there's 3 payment options available. What we do is we customize not only your funeral wishes, but we also customize how you can pay for it. Again, a prime example is what COVID did to some families financially. So we understand everybody is in a different place. And so we are able to customize however it works for you to pay for it.
Is cremation a more cost-effective option than burial? So not necessarily. There is a variety of options that include cremation. And so planning ahead truly gives you all of the different options from you to choose from.
Is there a way to protect money that is set aside for my final expenses from the healthcare industry should I need long-term care? Savannah just alluded to this briefly, but when we do set up an irrevocable funeral policy, that money is considered, we could say, disappearing as an asset. It's in a protected fund. So no matter what happens to you physically or financially, your funeral fund can never, ever be touched by the county, the nursing home, or the state of Iowa. Even if you end up on Title 19, it is the one financial vehicle that you can have so your family can do whatever you wanted for a funeral. You can have a dignified funeral and burial, even if you've outlived your money. As I shared earlier, my mom's cost in memory care was astronomical. And we were blessed, actually, in that she passed away before she ran out of money. But had she run out of money, we were very close. Her funeral was all paid for. We did not have to worry that if she ran out of money, we would never have to skimp on anything for her. So anything that you pre-fund, at least the way Adams does it, can never, ever be touched. It is all protected.
Won't my life insurance cover everything at the time of my need? So a couple of things that goes with this question. It absolutely depends on if you have enough. The other part of it is because since life insurance isn't offered through the funeral home, you don't have the ability to guarantee any costs. And for some people, not everyone, that's a big factor. And the other thing, of course, as Carol was just saying, a lot of times the policy, in the event that it has any cash value, would have to be surrendered because they do count that toward or as an asset.
Are there benefits for me as a veteran as it relates to final expenses? And first of all, we want to say if there's any veterans out there, thank you so much for your service. We very much appreciate that. There are veteran benefits, and that would be something that Savannah would talk to you one-on-one about. It depends on what cemetery and things like that. But yes, there are some limited benefits, and again, Savannah would go into detail on your private consultation about that.
Will my policy transfer with me if I move? Absolutely. You are the owner of the policy. It's usable at any funeral home in the United States. However, the one thing that I will say is that I can't promise that, the things that we guarantee at our funeral home, another funeral home would guarantee that. But just so you know, yes, it's transferable wherever you go.
And our last question today is, what can I do this afternoon to take the next step towards completing my pre-planning? Well, you call up your Savannah. And so it's vitally important. And again, you guys, this is the easiest thing in the world to put off. Like I said, I've been doing this 22 years. I've worked with thousands of families. It is the easiest thing in the world to put off because it's never anything fun to talk about. But do something, no matter what funeral home you pick. The thing that we can't stress enough is just do something. Call your Savannah and get things started for yourself and for your family. Yes, Vicky's coming.
I had just asked him, and at that point, there weren't any questions. Maybe he's pulling some up now. So if you have questions, please type those in. While we're waiting for those to come through, I'm just going to let you know about our upcoming programs. And just so you know, the last set of programs we sent just went through April. This was the last one on there. Hopefully in the next week or two, you'll be getting your May through August program. So I'm going to give you just a little highlight of the first two coming up. We will have a program Thursday, May 13th. That is Love the Skin You're In, Diabetes and Wound Care. And then we are going to have a program Tuesday, May 11th. And again, these programs are at 2 p.m. And this one will be Your Eyes as You Age. So we'll both be great programs. And you guys must have done a great job. I'm not seeing any questions coming through yet, but maybe, Tim, do you think somebody's typing them in? Oh, here we go. We have a question.
Okay.
If you want to read it right there.
Does Adams Funeral Home do their own cremation or outsource? Great question. So we just opened up our brand new facility out in West Ames, right off of 30. And yep, we do have our own crematory and a brand new building, which I office out of, and it's absolutely beautiful. So anytime anybody would ever be interested in doing a tour, please let us know.
I'm going to throw one thing in with that. Savannah doesn't do that justice as far as saying they built this. And sorry, but this is a little plug for Adam, but they built a gorgeous cremation center. It does not look like a crematory. It's a beautiful building. It's very comfortable for you to come in. Like Savannah said, she offices out of there. So it's very safe as far as COVID. There's minimal traffic, but you will be very comfortable.
Can you give us approximate cost estimates? So typically we don't do anything just because we've got multiple different people on here and not everybody wants the same thing. You know, it's very hard to talk about cremation when someone is looking for traditional services with a casket and outer burial container when we're at way different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and you know, a good way to do that, you guys, because like Savannah was just saying, everybody on this Zoom today is going to have a different idea and a different opinion of what they want. And so we have really learned that it's very, very difficult to try to do a cost estimate. Savannah, there's no cost or obligation whatsoever when you meet with Savannah, or it should be at any funeral home, and that will allow you to get an exact quote.
Do you do natural burials? So we actually just had somebody call into our funeral home in Boone the other day, and they were inquiring about that. And as far as I could see in Iowa, it wasn't. A natural burial. So that's going to be essentially no embalming, no fancy casket. I don't believe any casket at all. It would just strictly be maybe in a shroud and then in the ground. But however, like I was saying, in the state of Iowa, that isn't very common because most cemeteries do require that outer burial container or vault. However, I was doing a little bit of research and I came across a cemetery in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that has a cemetery, and I got some information on that. So I would be more than happy to talk to you about that at a later time. Let's see. Next question. Generally speaking, how many death certificates might one need to order? Who would all need an original death certificate? So that's a good question. When I meet with families, I typically like to say anywhere from 3 to 5. A good rule of thumb is, depending on life insurance, if it's still active, stocks, bonds, investments. A lot of times people have that with one guy or one gal, one entity. And so a lot of times they would just need the one. Some banks.
Yeah, bank accounts.
Bank accounts.
Or if you own a home or a vehicle. And so we kind of work with you one-on-one on how many you do need.
However, what I will say is that in the event that you would ever need more, they're not hard to get. We can have them within a day. Do implanted medical devices such as pacemakers need to be removed prior to embalming or cremation?
I do. Do you want me to answer?
Okay,
so if we want to get specific about a pacemaker, yes, a pacemaker will need to be removed prior to cremation. But as far as anything else with embalming, no. With cremation, yes, on a pacemaker. Great questions, you guys, by the way. We appreciate it.
Okay, well, it looks like, all right. Well, Savannah and Carol, thank you so much.
Thanks.
One more. And if any other questions come in, I can forward them to you, and we'll make sure that we get those answered. Some great information, maybe a great starting point for a lot of people, and some good questions and things to talk with your family about. So thank you for joining us. Have a great day, and we hope to have you back next month when we have more programs going. Thanks.